In ADX Florence, every bite is measured, every calorie controlled, and every moment of mealtime is another reminder, you're not free. For most of us, food brings comfort. For them, it's a system of survival, cold, silent, and time to the second. Welcome to ADX Florence, a week of isolation meals. Before we begin, make sure to subscribe, because in this series, we expose the hidden realities of America's most secretive prison, one cell at a time. The sound of the tray slot. There's no breakfast bell in ADX Florence. No cafeteria chatter. No scent of frying eggs or clinking of silverware. At 5 a.m., the first sound an inmate hears is a metallic clank, the sound of a steel tray sliding through a narrow slot in a reinforced door. This is breakfast. No words, no faces, just the cold exchange between the unseen guard and the unseen man inside. For the roughly 400 inmates inside ADX Florence, the federal government's highest security Supermax facility, this ritual defines every day. Meals arrive 3 times daily, delivered through a rectangular opening barely wide enough for a tray. Prisoners are confined in solitary cells for 23 hours a day, meaning that even eating happens in isolation. The breakfast tray usually contains a few standard items. A small carton of milk or juice. A single hard-boiled egg or scoop of powdered scrambled eggs. 1 serving of oatmeal or grits. A slice of white bread or muffin. All pre-portioned, weighed, and often cold by the time it reaches the cell. There's no microwave, no reheating, no seasoning. Inmates often describe the food as institutional paste, bland, lukewarm, and purely functional. But in ADX, even this food is a privilege. According to the Bureau of Prisons, inmates can lose access to normal meals if they misuse food items, turning trays into weapons, smearing food on walls, or throwing items at guards. When that happens, they're placed on what's called the Nutraloaf diet, a form of food punishment used to enforce control. Nutraloaf, officially known as the Special Management Meal, is a baked block containing vegetables, flour, beans, and oil, all blended into a dense loaf. It's meant to provide nutrition without pleasure. Inmates describe it as inedible, dry clay, or like eating punishment itself. For a man who's been alone for years, sometimes decades, even food becomes psychological warfare. Every bite reinforces that someone else controls your body, your hunger, and your smallest human need. ADX Florence wasn't built for rehabilitation, it was built for containment. Each cell measures about 7 feet by 12 feet, made of concrete with a fixed steel toilet, sink, and shower. The tray slot, about the size of a letterbox, becomes the only physical connection to the outside world. Guards push the tray through quickly to minimize risk. There's no talking during delivery. Guards move in silence, sliding food through door after door down the long, echoing hallway. Each door marked by a small number, each cell containing someone who, by the system's measure, is too dangerous for human contact. Over the years, ADX has housed men like Ted Kaczynski, the Unabomber, Ramzi Youssef, 1993 World Trade Center bomber, and Richard Reed, the shoe bomber. Even their meals were the same: trays, silence, isolation. Federal reports describe this routine as control through monotony. The goal isn't to punish through violence, but through routine, by stripping every act of meaning until a person becomes mechanical. Breakfast, tray out. Lunch, tray in. Dinner, lights out. And yet, the human mind adapts. Some inmates hoard bits of bread to mark the passing of days. Others invent rituals, wiping the tray slot before every meal, saving milk cartons as trophies, or whispering thank you even though no one hears it. In this world, the act of eating isn't about nourishment, it's about staying sane. The Bureau of Prisons claims that ADX Florence provides humane, nutritionally balanced meals. But multiple former inmates and staff, speaking in reports, depositions, and documentaries, reveal that reality is far more severe. Some meals are served cold due to the long distance between the kitchen and cell blocks. Others arrive late because of lockdowns. And for those on disciplinary status, the Nutraloaf diet can last up to 7 days at a time. The prison's kitchen operates like a military facility. Food is prepared by inmates working under guard supervision in lower security units of the complex, not inside the Supermax itself. Meals are sealed in insulated trays and wheeled through security gates, each container checked for contraband or tampering. By the time breakfast reaches the control unit, the deepest part of ADX, it has passed through 7 locked doors. For the inmates, this mechanical process turns every meal into a reminder. The system feeds you not out of care but out of duty. And so begins a week of isolation meals. 7 days where the tray slot becomes a mirror, showing not what's on the plate but what's left of the man eating it. The cold lunch hour. By 11 a.m., ADX Florence is silent. The kind of silence that hums in your ears. The only sound breaking through the concrete is the faint echo of footsteps from correctional officers making their rounds. For most inmates, lunch isn't something to look forward to. It's just another mark on the clock, a checkpoint in a never-ending loop of isolation. Each cell has a solid steel door with a small slit of bulletproof glass about the size of a sheet of paper. Through that slit, you might see a guard's shadow as the lunch cart rolls past, a cart stacked with steel trays, each stamped with an inmate's number. There are no names here. Just numbers. For the men inside, lunch is the most predictable part of the day. The menu rarely changes. A scoop of rice or pasta. One small portion of chicken, turkey, or a soy-based patty. Cooked vegetables or beans. A slice of white bread. And occasionally a piece of fruit, usually an apple or banana. Every item fits into its compartment like parts in a machine. No sauces. No extras. No seasoning. The meals are designed for efficiency, not enjoyment, measured to meet minimum nutritional standards set by the Bureau of Prisons. According to the official BOP Food Service Manual, every federal inmate must receive at least 2,600 calories per day, divided evenly among 3 meals. But former inmates from ADX report that the food often feels insufficient, especially when you can't move, exercise, or even talk to anyone. Hunger, boredom, and silence blend into a dull ache that sits in the stomach long after the tray is taken away. One former inmate, Jack Powers, who spent more than a decade in ADX, described it in a 2013 court affidavit. You learn to eat slowly. Not because you want to savor it but because it's something to do. Lunch becomes the only time your mind can wander. The taste doesn't matter. It's just quiet. Inside ADX, every action has a protocol, including lunch. Guards must stand to the side of the cell door while sliding the tray in to avoid contact. Inmates are ordered to stand at the back of the cell until the slot is shut again. Once the tray is inside, they can approach. Everything is recorded on camera. Every tray is tracked. If an inmate refuses a meal, which happens more often than people think, it's logged and reported. Repeated refusals trigger mental health checks, as refusal to eat can be interpreted as self-harm behavior. In some cases, inmates on hunger strikes are placed under medical observation, and if the strike continues, the Bureau can authorize force feeding. In 2011, a group of inmates from ADX Florence participated in a coordinated hunger strike to protest long-term solitary confinement and mental health neglect. During the strike, meals went untouched for days, and reports showed that guards were required to document each untouched tray, often photographing them before disposal. In extreme cases, prisoners were transferred to medical cells, restrained and fed through nasal tubes. The official reason: to preserve life. The inmates called it eating through punishment. Even among staff, the emotional toll of the food system at ADX is known. A retired correctional officer interviewed by the Marshall Project in 2020 said, "We weren't serving meals, we were feeding ghosts. You push a tray in and you never see the man's face. Just a hand reaching out from a hole in the door. That hand, tattooed, thin, sometimes trembling, becomes the most human image in the entire institution." The physical environment only deepens the sense of detachment. The cells are climate-controlled but often feel cold due to the concrete. Fluorescent lights stay on from 5 a.m. to 11 p.m., giving inmates little sense of natural time. There are no communal dining rooms, no chatter, no clatter of utensils. Every man eats alone, surrounded by concrete and silence. Yet, some find ways to reclaim a small sense of humanity. A few inmates, according to former ADX chaplain Reverend Jim Ferguson, would pray before each meal, whispering blessings in English, Arabic, or Spanish. Others would save their bread for later, turning it into makeshift snacks to break the monotony. These small rituals, private and unseen, become survival mechanisms. Food psychologists call this phenomenon ritualized eating under confinement. When every day looks the same, people create meaning through microcontrol: how they eat, when they eat, and what they save. For inmates at ADX, where control is stripped to the bone, these rituals can mean the difference between mental collapse and endurance. There are no utensils made of metal, only sporks or plastic spoons designed to break easily. Even condiments like ketchup or salt are prohibited in most units. The risk of using them to block locks, write messages, or harm oneself is too high. This level of restriction extends even to how trays are cleaned. Guards collect them after exactly 15 minutes. Any delay is documented as non-compliance. For outsiders, the meal process sounds mechanical. But for the men inside, each meal is a lifeline, the only predictable human contact in an environment engineered to erase time. That's why lunch, cold and tasteless as it is, becomes sacred. Not for its flavor but because it confirms one truth: they still exist. As the tray is pulled back through the slot, the cell door remains unbroken steel. But for a brief moment, that small window of exchange connects two worlds, the system and the man it contains. When the footsteps fade again, the silence returns. The inmate sits back on his concrete bed, eyes fixed on the tray's outline on the floor. Another meal gone. Another hour survived. Tomorrow it will be the same. But at ADX, sameness is both punishment and proof of life. Dinner in the dark, the night shift meal. By the time the dinner trays start rolling out, the sun has already disappeared behind the Rockies. Outside the walls of Florence, Colorado, the sky turns from amber to black, but inside ADX, the light never truly changes. Fluorescent bulbs hum overhead, and every shadow is under surveillance. Dinner is served between 4:30 and 5 p.m., early by any normal standard, but in ADX Florence, time isn't about convenience, it's about control. Every movement in the building is scheduled, synchronized, and monitored through the central control hub, a command center filled with screens showing every hallway, every cell, every hand that reaches out through the tray slot. For the inmate, dinner marks the end of all interaction for the day. Once that tray is pulled back, the door will not open again until morning. No phone calls, no visits, no sounds beyond the steady hum of air vents. This final meal then is more than just food, it's the last thread of connection before another 12 hours of silence. The standard ADX dinner often includes a small portion of ground beef, chicken, or fish substitute, a starch like mashed potatoes or rice, a portion of mixed vegetables, bread or cornbread, a dessert portion, usually a cookie, pudding, or fruit cup, and a small carton of milk or water packet. Each tray is designed for nutrition, not comfort. Everything is cooked in bulk in the lower security kitchen, portioned, sealed, and sent up through multiple secure gates. It can take up to 45 minutes from preparation to delivery, meaning that by the time dinner reaches an inmate's cell, the food is often lukewarm or cold. A former ADX cook, interviewed anonymously for a 2018 Vice News report, described the process bluntly. "We feed them like clockwork, but the food's dead by the time it hits their cell. It's fuel, nothing more. There's no conversation, no eye contact. Guards announce the meal only with a brief call, 'Tray.' The sound of the steel slot opening echoes through the tier. A hand emerges, collects the tray, and the slot snaps shut again. The tray slot, officially called a Sally Port feeding aperture, is small but significant. It's the one physical space where the prison and the prisoner meet. Over time, even that gesture, the metal sliding, the short pause, the retreating footsteps, becomes part of the rhythm of survival. Inside the cell, the inmate usually sits on the bed or concrete stool to eat. There's no table, no dining space, no utensils except the small plastic spork. Some men spread a napkin over their knees to mimic the feeling of a meal. Others eat straight from the tray in silence. For those with long sentences, 20, 30, even life, this process repeats thousands of times. Every tray looks the same, every flavor blurs into the next. Many describe losing their sense of taste after years inside. Psychologists who've studied solitary confinement refer to this as sensory flattening. When every sight, sound, and smell is stripped away, even taste begins to dull. The brain adapts to monotony by lowering its sensitivity. For the inmates of ADX Florence, this makes every meal feel like eating shadows. But dinner has its dangers too. Any sign of agitation during meal delivery can trigger what the Bureau of Prisons calls a code red response. If an inmate throws food, yells at staff, or refuses to return a tray, officers in riot gear are deployed to the tier. Meals are then suspended and lockdown becomes total. In the control unit, even this can escalate further. Food can be withheld temporarily for security reasons, replaced with the dreaded Nutraloaf once again. The official report from a 2015 Federal Bureau of Prisons oversight hearing confirmed that ADX used this method dozens of times per year, legally justified as behavioral management. Inmates, however, see it differently. They don't just feed you to keep you alive, one former prisoner wrote in a 2019 letter to his attorney. They feed you to remind you who owns your hunger. Every tray becomes a lesson in obedience. After dinner, the routine continues. Guards collect trays, check each cell visually through the narrow window, and log the completion time. Inmates are ordered to return the tray immediately after finishing. Failure to comply can lead to disciplinary reports. From then on, the night stretches endlessly. The cell lights dim slightly but never go fully dark. Surveillance cameras remain active, motion sensors stay live, and even turning over on the bed can trigger a flicker on the control screens. The body, fed but restless, begins to feel the confinement more acutely. With no books, no conversation, and no human presence, the mind loops through memories, family dinners, holidays, the sound of laughter. Food, once a comfort, becomes a trigger of longing. Inmates who have spent years in solitary often describe vivid food memories, a coping mechanism where they recall tastes, smells, and moments from the outside world. A 2016 psychiatric study on ADX inmates found that over 70% reported recurring sensory hallucinations involving food, from phantom smells of barbecues to dreams about sitting in restaurants they once visited. For them, dinner in ADX is a cruel paradox. It keeps the body alive while reminding the mind of everything it's lost. When the final tray is collected, the hallway goes quiet again. Only the hum of ventilation and the low buzz of fluorescent light remain. Some inmates press their ears against the door, listening for the last echo of footsteps. Others lie flat on their bunks, staring at the ceiling, waiting for the next morning when another tray will slide through the slot, and the cycle will begin again. The system calls it routine. The inmates call it forever. The psychology of hunger, when silence eats back. Hunger in ADX Florence isn't just a matter of food. It's a dialogue between body and mind, a war between the instinct to survive and the slow erosion of will. In a place where human contact is nearly absent, hunger becomes the only sensation that still feels real. Inside the administrative maximum facility, inmates live alone in concrete cells roughly 7 by 12 feet. They eat alone. They think alone. They exist alone. And after years of isolation, even the body begins to betray itself. According to Bureau of Prisons medical data and independent studies by human rights organizations, inmates in long-term solitary confinement experience dramatic physiological and psychological effects, especially around food. Appetite loss, digestive problems, sleep disorders, and weight fluctuation are common. But more profound is what psychologists call psychogenic starvation. This is when hunger stops being about the stomach. It becomes emotional, even spiritual. The erosion of appetite. Every day inside ADX follows the same rhythm. Wake up, eat, sit, think, pace, sleep, repeat. There are no events to look forward to. No conversation to break monotony. Over time, that stillness consumes energy. Metabolism slows. Interest in food fades. Former inmate Thomas Silverstein, who spent over 35 years in isolation, much of it at ADX, described how the human relationship to food changes. After a while, I didn't eat because I was hungry. I ate because it was time. The food didn't matter. The taste didn't matter. It was like filling a gas tank I never drove. In ADX, food becomes an act of obedience. The system decides what, when, and how. There's no choice, and that lack of control corrodes the sense of self. Inmates who try to resist that control often do so through hunger. Refusing food becomes the only form of rebellion left. The silent protest. Since its opening in 1994, ADX Florence has seen multiple hunger strikes, often unreported to the public. One of the most documented occurred in 2011, when inmates protested what they called endless isolation. According to leaked Bureau of Prisons memoranda obtained by the Marshall Project and the New York Times, the strike lasted over 3 weeks. Meals were logged as refused. Health checks became mandatory. And as the protests spread, the Bureau invoked its Inmate Health Protection Protocol, authorizing medical staff to intervene. Force feeding, officially termed enteral nutrition under restraint, was carried out through a thin rubber tube inserted through the nose and into the stomach. The process is painful, degrading, and controversial under international human rights law. But in ADX, it's considered procedure. A former prison medic, quoted anonymously in a 2017 human rights deposition, said, "Some of them cried. Others didn't move at all. But they always looked you in the eye, as if to say, this is the only power I have left." The hunger strike wasn't just about food, it was about recognition. In a world stripped of contact, refusing to eat was the only way to be seen. The mind inside the cell. Psychologists working with ADX inmates describe hunger as a conversation with the void. When a man spends 23 hours a day in silence, the mind begins to fold inward. The brain starts creating sensory loops, smells, tastes, or memories that feel real but aren't. Some inmates report phantom meals, describing the taste of home-cooked food they haven't had in decades. Others imagine family dinners, birthday cakes, or the smell of fried onions, sensations so vivid they can feel them in their mouths. But when the tray finally arrives, reality breaks the illusion. A lukewarm portion of rice and vegetables. No smell, no texture, no warmth. Just calories and quiet. The mind learns to disconnect. Eating becomes mechanical. Chewing turns rhythmic, almost hypnotic. This detachment, according to Dr. Craig Haney, a leading expert on solitary confinement psychology, is the brain's way of protecting itself. The body continues its function, but the person begins to vanish. The punishment of food. In ADX, even food can be weaponized. The special management meal, known colloquially as Nutraloaf, is one of the most controversial practices in the prison system. It's not officially called punishment, but it's used as a consequence for misconduct. The loaf is made from pureed vegetables, beans, oil, flour, and salt, baked into a dense brick. Served without utensils, it's designed to be unappealing but nutritionally complete. ADX policy allows its use for up to 7 days per disciplinary period. But former staff have admitted it's sometimes extended unofficially. In a 2014 court case, Henderson v. Thomas, evidence from multiple facilities, including ADX, described the loaf as a psychological deterrent through deprivation of taste. One inmate compared it to chewing cement soaked in oil. Another said, "After 3 days I begged for regular food, not because I was hungry but because I missed flavor." Flavor, it turns out, is more than taste. It's memory, comfort, connection, things deliberately erased in the world of ADX Florence. The body responds. When hunger becomes emotional, the body reacts violently. Medical reports reveal inmates suffering from gastritis, ulcers, and malnutrition symptoms even while receiving adequate calories. The lack of sunlight and movement slows digestion. Many men develop bloating and chronic pain. A 2018 Journal of Correctional Healthcare study found that inmates in prolonged isolation are 5 times more likely to experience disordered eating patterns than those in general population units. Some overeat when food arrives, trying to fill the emptiness. Others ration it, stretching one meal over 6 hours just to break the silence. A few smear food on the walls, not out of defiance, but because in a gray world, even color becomes a form of expression. And then there are those who simply stop eating. They lose weight, strength, and eventually the will to fight. Medical staff step in, but treatment is reactive. The deeper hunger, the one for meaning, for contact, for humanity, remains unfed. Hunger is mirror. In ADX, the stomach becomes a reflection of the soul. Some men eat to live. Others eat to feel alive. But all of them understand one truth. The system doesn't just control your body, it conditions your hunger. By the 7th year, some forget what hunger even feels like. By the 15th, even flavor becomes memory. And when asked what they miss most about the outside world, most don't mention freedom, sunlight, or sleep. They say, a hot meal. Shared with someone else. That single sentence captures what ADX Florence was built to erase. Connection. Because in the Supermax, isolation doesn't starve you fast. It starves you slow. 7 days. 21 trays. Thousands of seconds of silence. In ADX Florence, even food, the most human act of all, is stripped of warmth, flavor, and choice. What remains is the essence of control. A system that feeds the body but starves everything else. Every tray slid through a slot says the same thing. You exist because we allow it. Every empty plate whispers, you are not forgotten but you are contained. Some men spend decades eating this way. Others never make it out. But every one of them learns the same truth, that isolation doesn't just confine the body. It consumes the soul. If you've made it this far, you now know what most Americans will never see, the world's most controlled dining room, where silence is the main ingredient and time is the only seasoning. Before you leave, take a second to subscribe, not for entertainment but for awareness. Because the stories inside these walls are real, and they deserve to be seen, heard, and remembered. This has been ADX Florence. A week of isolation meals, the story of hunger, silence, and survival behind the world's toughest prison walls.